Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. I sure do appreciate y'all tuning back in and seeing what we've got coming this week. And I also appreciate all the subscribes, the likes, the comments, everything, man. Y'all put the word out there, tell your buddies. I'm gonna keep these coming. I'm gonna keep all the little tips, tricks, everything I do. I'm gonna keep that coming to y'all. This week, we're gonna go over line. I'm gonna make this a two-part video series because there is a long, in-depth conversation you can have over line sizes, line choices, everything, diameter. There's a lot to do about line. This week's going to be over line types and what I use them for and the different sizes. Next week will be more applications, spooling a spinning reel up the right way. There is a right and a wrong way. Spooling one by yourself while you're on the water. Just a few tricks that's going to help you keep your composure, if you will, while you're on the water. So let's jump right in. First thing I'm going to get into is mono. This is my mono right here. I use suffix a lot. I'll use the trilene. No really certain. It's a lot of good mono out there. Mono floats. That's the number one thing. Mono floats, and it has a lot of stretch. This is the stretchiest line there is. Monofilament. This is it. When I'm trolling, spider rigging, whatever you want to call it, this is what I'll use. I'll use 8 to 10 pound mono 9 times out of 10. If I'm in a really stumpy, a lot of structure, I'll go up to 10. That way, if I get hung up, I can bend them hooks out when I pull, when I'm spider rigging. If I'm just open water, 9 times out, the biggest majority of the time, I'm using 8 pound mono whenever I'm spider rigging. I use this 100% of the time when I'm pulling crankbaits, pulling jigs, what have you. I use 10 pound mono when I'm pulling anything, and then I'll adjust the weight to where how deep I want to fish. I'll put a bigger jig head if I'm pulling jigs, or I'll put out more line if I'm pulling crankbait. But I always use 10 pound mono when I'm pulling anything behind the boat. I'll use mono also as a leader on top of braid if I want to slow the fall rate of the bait. The mono floats, so if I've got a jig, just say it's a really windy day and I need to be pitching or dropping an 1/8 ounce jig, or it's really deep and I needed to get down to them quick, I can take an 1/8 ounce jig, and then on braid, when I'm spooled up a braid, instead of putting a fluorocarbon leader on there, I'll put mono on there, and I'll start off with about a 6 to 8 pound mono leader, and it'll allow me to be able to still cast the same with that 1/8 ounce jig, but it'll slow the fall rate to where I need it to be. I can take 8, that'll slow it a little bit, and that'll keep it riding a little bit higher in the water because mono floats, braid don't. At mono, and if it's sinking a little too fast on me, or it's riding a little too deep for me, and I need that extra weight for casting or getting down to them, I'll move up to a 10. And I'll just keep going up until I get that fall rate or that ride rate, I like to call it, where the jig will ride at a slow, constant retrieve. I'll keep playing with a mono if I need to do that on them certain days. A lot of days, most of the time, I just adjust that with, 32nd, 16th, 8th, quarter, 48th, the jig type. But on them conditions, it's really windy and you need the heavier jig to where you can be more accurate, I'll use a mono leader, and then I'll adjust the line size according to how deep I need the bait to run, how fast I need it to fall, how slow I need it to fall. Mono's really good for that because, like I said, mono has a lot of stretch and it also floats. It does not sink. So use mono, spider rigging, all the time when you're pulling crankbaits, pulling jigs, anything like that. That's when you use mono. Next, we're going to go to braid. And this is the most sensitive line there is out there. This is braid. This is Power Pro right here. I use a lot of different braids. I use Seagar, Suffix, Power Pro, Spider Wire, K9. There's a lot of good braids out there. Braid is the most sensitive line. It does not stretch at all. Braid floats, it does not sink. I use braid 100% of the time on my jig poles. When I'm dropping down on them, I got braid. Most of the time I'll have me a fluorocarbon leader, because fluorocarbon you can't see, the braid you can. In dirtier water, I'll just go tie straight to the braid. You can feel the deadgum bark on a tree if it's freshly put out. You can feel everything. If a fish swims by it, not flies, the fish ain't gonna fly unless there's a flying fish in the ocean. That's neither here nor there. I got off on it. You can feel everything with braid, I promise you. A lot of times when I'm dropping straight down on them, I'll have me when I'm jig fishing, I'll have me about a 5-foot braid, braid leader, fluorocarbon leader on my braid. But at all times, my jig pole is spooled with braid. And I'll use the I guess you would say the heavier braid. I'll use 20-pound braid when I'm jig fishing. And I like the stiffer braid. You can get some that's really smooth, and I use that for casting. For jig fishing, I use the stiffer braid so it don't get wrapped around. You know how you'll drop your jig in the water and it'll be slack and it'll wrap around the end of your rod. Use the stiffer braid and it'll stop that. Other than just very seldom, it might still do it, but most of the time that'll cut all that out. Use a little bit stiffer braid, spider wire for that. You won't get that little trouble around the end of it all the time. But like I said, braid is really, really sensitive. You can feel everything in the world, most sensitive line. It does not have any stretch. I would advise heavily, do not put this on your trolling poles. If you're spider rigging, don't put braid, because the only thing that's going to give is your rod. This don't. So you put this on one of them slab cities and you salge in old biggin down there in Mississippi, well, guess what? More likely, you're either going to pull the hook. Better yet, more than likely, you're probably going to break the rod tip somewhere, because this does not give at all. Mono does, this don't. You can feel a gnat sneeze with this stuff right here. I mean, everything in the water you can feel with this. This is the best for sensitivity, hands down. When I'm casting and pitching, I'll be spooled up with braid 95% of the time. And I'll just put me a fluorocarbon leader on. That way I can, fluorocarbon's less visible in the water. I can adjust the fall rate like we was talking about with the mono. I'll always have some braid on. Especially when I'm jig fishing, always, just because it's so sensitive. You can feel the lightest of light bites. And braid floats. When you cast into them, it'll hold the bait up too. If you need it to be held down, if you want it to drop, put you some fluorocarbon in there. But braid is the best all around as far as sensitivity. This is what you want to use on all of your jig poles. I like to run 20-pound braid on my jig poles, 10-pound when I'm pitching and casting. That's the size on that. I like the little stiffer braid when I'm dropping on them jig fishing, the soft braid when I'm casting and pitching. Braid is on the biggest majority of my reels. And like I said, you can get a lot. Spider Wire, K9, Power Pro, Cigar, Suffix, they all make really good braids. That's just what I prefer. Next, that's mono right there. How'd you get over there? You were hanging out. Next is my fave, fluorocarbon. This here is Cigar Tatsu, I think's what it is. Some kind of deadgum, I don't know, Australian name. Let's throw another shrimp on the barbie. Some kind of name, I'm not sure. Tatsu, Cigar, whatever it is. They make yellow label, they make red label, they make this right here, there's all kind of deadgum fluorocarbons out there, and it's all good stuff. Cigar, Suffix, Berkeley, there's K9, there's a lot of good fluorocarbons out there, and they're all really good. You just find which one you like the best. This is what I have on my casting rod 100% of the time. Not 100, no, I'd say 90, because sometimes you might have to slow the fall rate and stuff in mono. The biggest majority of the time, this is on my casting rods the biggest majority of the time. And also, I'll put it on my jig pole if I think the fish are a little bit line shy, and I'll just tie me about a 5-foot leader on my braid if I think they are line shy, because fluorocarbon is invisible. It does not reflect light in the water. You can't see it. That's why everybody uses this. Fluorocarbon also sinks. It's a lot more dense than mono is. This will sink on you. If you want to get a bait down there, bass guys, if they want to get crankbaits a little bit deeper, that's why they use fluorocarbon a lot of time, to allow that bait to get deeper. Fluorocarbon does not have very much stretch at all. It has less stretch than mono, but it still has a little bit more stretch than the braid, because the braid has 0. This has a little bit, just a tiny little bit now, but the mono has the most. This has not very much stretch in it. It's really dense. It's more sensitive than a mono also. It's not quite as sensitive as braid, but it's more sensitive than mono. I like to use 6-pound test the biggest majority of the time. Sometimes it's kind of like the mono. I'll bump it up to 8-pound test if I'm in some heavy timber, brush piles, just depending on rocks, riprap, I'll bump it up, because this stuff can get nicked up. And that's the thing about fluorocarbon. If you're fishing, if you're fishing open water, don't worry about it. I mean, you might want to retie your knot, but if you're fishing some kind of cover, mats, standing timber, riprap, every so often, just pull your line up and run your hands up and down it and make sure you don't feel no little scuffs and nicks on it, because it will scuff on you and it'll nick up. And one thing you don't want to do is have a little scuff in it that you wasn't checking and go on down there and salge on old Gooden, and then guess what? Pop goes a weasel, because the weasel went pop because you had a spot in your line that was bad that you didn't check. Keep a check on that. Fluorocarbon is bad about getting a little nick on it. Everything else about it's good. That's probably the downfall, is it nicks up and scuffs up really easy. Like I said, no stretch on it. 6 to 8 is where I like to stay when I'm casting, pitching. Even when I'm putting a leader on it for my braid, if I'm jig fishing, 6 to 8 is where I stay the biggest majority of the time. We have went down. When we was in Table Rock, we went down. Hamilton, I went down in size. I went down to some 2 pound and some 4 pound. Just depending on, a lot of that, the reason for that was just because of the clarity of the water, how clear it was. Fishing deeper, you can get your bait down quicker. This sinks, so it's going to help your bait fall even faster in the water. Smaller diameter you go, the quicker it's going to fall down there. The bigger diameter you go, the slower, just because, I mean, you throw something big in the water, it's going to fall slower than you throw something tiny in the water, because it's least resistance coming through the water. But fluorocarbon is going to be on the biggest majority of my reels in the boat. About 80% of them I'll spool up with braid and then put me about a 5 to 6 foot fluorocarbon leader on it. And about 20 to 25% of them I'll spool with straight fluorocarbon. And no with the size of this also. But fluorocarbon is my go-to. Make the difference in that. It's invisible. This is my go-to. Like I said, there's a lot of good fluorocarbons out there. I like Seaguar. I like the K9 that just come out here not long ago. Suffolk makes a good one. Berkeley makes a good one. There's a lot of good fluorocarbon. Just find one that you like, that fits your budget, fits your style, just whatever you like. Get that kind of fluorocarbon. But that's the story on the old fluoro, as they say in the biz. Next, I'm going to run over real quick. This is something I don't use a lot anymore. This is high-vis monofilament. And you can get high-vis braid, and I'm pretty sure you can get high-vis fluorocarbon. I don't know that I've ever seen high-vis fluorocarbon. I know you can get high-vis braid, but this is high-vis mono. This just happened to be 6 pound P line. This is some good line right here. There's a lot of good monos like we talked about earlier, but this is about the high-vis. I'll use high-vis when I'm spider rigging or trolling the biggest majority of the time, because you can see the light bites. A lot of times, if you're trolling, sometimes they don't just get up and just jump all over it and smoke it. And you see the pole, and you know, it ain't them days to where you look over and your number 2 pole's about 4 eyes deep and she just sousing. Some days it ain't like that. Some days you ain't got no 5-eye bites, what I like to call them, when they pull a rod 5 eyes down. That's when you got those big on there. Now, some days they'll bite light, and that's the reason I like to use this fluorescent colored line. You can see it move, like when you're spider rigging down through there, or if you're at if you're just sitting still, a lot of times a fish will just come up there and just barely bump it and move your line. And you'll see this fluorocarbon a lot quicker than you're going to see that clear line. Moving one way or another. A lot of times, a jig bite, they might come up and pop your line, and it'll be laying on top of the water, just wad it up. A lot of times in Grenada, they're bad about that. They're so aggressive. They'll come spool your line. Your slack will be laying up there on top. You know you got old big, then you get into it. You lean all up, boy. I'm going to tell you, that's getting me fired up just thinking about it. I'm going to put them old dadgum spider trolls back out front and go to Grenada and try and get on some of that jig bite. Boy, I miss them days. God, that's so much fun. But another reason that people use fluorescent, fluorescent, whatever you want to say, is a lot when they're shooting docks. They use the fluorescent because they can see the bite. When you shoot a dock, there's a lot of slack because you shoot it up underneath that dock and then your jig just free falls. Well, you use this so you can see the line. You'll actually see the line jump whenever that fish bites. If you're using 4 pound, 6 pound, it don't matter. You shoot it up underneath the dock and watch your line, because it's falling on slack line. You'll see that line, you'll see it tick, or you'll see it jump just a little bit. You'll see something act different whenever that fish bites. Sometimes it may stop falling, but you'll have some kind of indication that he's done on there and he got it and he ain't got hands. It's in his mouth. He's swimming around tasting it. So you better go ahead and snatch into him. You can see all your bites with the fluorescent line. That's the number one. Every one of my poles that I shoot docks with, which I don't do a lot, is got fluorescent light on, so I can see that bite. But that's really the rundown on all of the lines, the styles, the poundage, everything about line. If y'all can think of anything else that y'all might need to know about the line and the size, the styles, any kind of question you have about the line, leave it in the comment and I'll answer back to you. Message me on our Facebook page. It don't really matter. Just get a hold of me somehow and I'll let you know whatever it is you need to know, or tell me something. If you got a little tip or a trick about a line, let me know. Next week, we're going to do spooling up on reels, the right way to spool a spinning reel, a casting reel, some tricks about how to do it. We're going to go over a few more things about usages, but mainly we're going to do spooling up a spinning reel the right way. Most people think you just pull her out of the package, tie your old slip knot on there and go to wind it on it. No. I can keep you from having a lot of heartache by spooling it up the right way, the correct way, when you're in your boat, when you're with your kids, whatever. I'm going to help you out with that if y'all just tune in next week. I sure do appreciate all the subscribes. Y'all keep it coming. Y'all keep the likes, subscribes, the comments, everything. I'm enjoying this. Keep it rolling. Check back in next week when we have the next video, and I'll see y'all down the road. I sure do appreciate it.